Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video. Hi, I thought I would use today's tip and trick video to show you how I set up my art table and some of the supplies that I use. So I will turn the video around and I will get started. First of all, this is basically how I have my art table set up, and I have probably quite a mess around it right now, but I'm kind of in between projects and other things that are going on, so I tend to go from clean to messy in 7 seconds or less, and then I go back and clean it up after I've completed a project. So I use a white drafting table, and it will fit a full sheet of watercolor paper if I slide my palette to the right, and I use my table flat. And then when I need to prop my paper up, my dad actually created a wooden block for me, and it's about 2 inches, and he carved on it for me, and I set my board on there, and I'll show that in a little bit. So right now you can see I have my palette on the right side of my table. I have 2 cups for water, and 1 cup is for clean water, and the cup that would be nearer my painting right here, that would be for the dirty water. And then I have, I started using a sponge, and this is just a glass, probably was for ashtray, but it was a pretty green glass that I liked, and so I put my sponge in there. And then I just use that to wipe my brush on sometimes. I have a setup that's a little different than most people would because I do my videos from overhead. So I created a PVC pipe layout, and normally my video camera would be sitting at the top up there. And I have 4 big lights up there that I can use to give me enough light. And lighting is really important when you're doing watercolor. You want your lights to be in the mid-range, so I believe it's like a daylight light bulb, so that it's not too warm and it's not too cool. Especially now with the LED lights, I would look for a daylight light bulb. And then recently I started using this pole that is set up so that I could have my other digital camera hanging down from that. So that's what that is. So then down here on my art table, hopefully I'm not making you guys dizzy, I have right now my light table. So when I do my drawing, and I'll see if I can show you that, I have a paper, this is Arches 140 pound cold press watercolor paper, and I'm getting a drawing put on there, and so my original drawing is done on a piece of separate paper, and then I ink it in with black ink so that it's dark, and then I print it off the size that I want to print it, and then I transfer it to my watercolor paper using this light table. And I have I believe the largest size of the Accurate brand. See if I can get that in there without the lights reflecting in there. So the Accurate light table is the brand I have, and this one says that the measurement up here at the top is 19, and then the side measurement is 11 inches of the area that you can use to light up. So I'll turn that on right quick so you can see. And let me turn off a couple of these overhead lights. And then you can tell, just even by turning off 2 of them, that I can see my drawing underneath my watercolor paper, and then I can use a pencil to transfer it onto my watercolor paper. Now, one thing about doing this method, and Or if you have just a brightly lit window, you could also do that by taping your drawing onto the window and then placing your watercolor paper on top of it. As long as it's a brightly lit window, you should be able to see well enough that you can transfer your drawing that way. But you do need to be careful, because if you draw too darkly, your pencil line can show up in your painting, and if you don't like that look, you just need to draw light enough. So usually what I will do is I will set up my light table, and then if there is not enough light coming in from my window to the left of me, then sometimes I will turn on a light off to the side so that I can kind of see my pencil line a little bit better and be able to see what I'm drawing. So it depends on what I'm working on or how dark the room is, but as long as my drawing is dark enough underneath, the light table works really well. And I have used it for 300-pound watercolor paper as well. It's just harder to see, so you really need to kind of adjust the lights in your room. Okay, so I am going to move my light table, and then I will be back and I'll talk about some more of my supplies and how I have my table set up. All right, so I have moved the light table, and I now have one of my Gator boards with a painting on it on my table, and this is about a quarter sheet size. It's a little bigger than a quarter sheet size. So a quarter sheet of watercolor paper is 11 by 15. So this is just a little bit bigger, and right now I have a hummingbird that is watercolor or drawn on watercolor paper on my board, and you can see I've stapled it down. So I stretch my watercolor paper, and I have a blog post that talks about that, and I also have a YouTube video that talks about that, and I'll try to remember to link that video up above. So I use the Gator Foam Board, and it is a hard surface, and then I tape the edges of mine so you can't see the foam that's on the inside right now. And then you could use both sides. So it is reusable, it is lightweight. The staples tend to stay pretty well on smaller paintings, but then when I do a bigger painting, half sheet or full sheet, I will usually tape over after the paper has dried and the staples are in. So I won't explain the whole stretching process right now, but just wanted you to see that this is usually how I have my paper laid out. So then when I'm painting, majority of the time I will have my painting up on my blocks so that it has an angle to it, so that as I'm working, the watercolor is not going to pool. It will kind of move down the paper with some gravity. Okay, so there's that, and I tend to keep my brushes off to the left side now. They sort of move around depending on where I'm painting, but it is helpful to sort of keep your brushes and your supplies in the same area all the time, whether you're painting on your kitchen table or an art table or you go to take a class, because then when you go to reach for something, you know where it's at and you can reach for it quickly. So if I know I'm going to be using certain brushes while I am painting, then I might bring those brushes over here, and I would wet the tips of the bristles of the brushes prior to painting with them, and that way they are ready to accept the paint and the water, and they kind of pre-moistens the brush so that they're usable very quickly. And then I just set it down and have it ready. The palette that I use is a Stephen Quiller palette, and this is the plastic one. It also comes in porcelain. I've used this for, probably more than 20 years now, and different, I have to get new ones because they do over time, and you can kind of see on that corner, they do crack on the plastic ones, especially if you're taking it back and forth to class or workshop. So the other thing that I have done with my palette is they come with the wide corner spot here for your paints. but I wanted to add a few more paints on some of my corners, so I used some hot glue, and you can see it pretty well right there, where I just use the hot glue and then add rows to it until it builds it up so that I can have a few more wells in my palette. I will be trying to put my palette layout colors on my blog sometime soon. I have a lot going on right now, so I don't know if that'll happen right away, but you might check back to see if I've updated my blog with my palette layout. And it does vary over time. I change colors every now and then when I realize I haven't been using something, or if there's a new color that I really want to have on my palette. But generally, majority of the colors stay the same. All right, so the brushes I use are, for most of the work I do right now, are the Silver Black Velvet brand. And so there's, whoops, let me see if I can rotate it and get it in focus. Maybe. It's hard to do this with, I need to be able to press the, let me see if I can set it down and we'll focus. Okay, there you go. So the biggest brush I have is this number 20, and it is by Silver, and it's their Black Velvet series. And they do have other brushes. I have a flat and some smaller ones, and then I have a few that are for riggers and things like that. So I really like these brushes because they are a blend where it's a portion is natural hair from an animal, and then the other is synthetic. And they hold a lot of water and pigment, and that's why I like them. Let's see, off to the side over here, I do have a spray bottle, so sometimes that's very handy to have available so I can wet my paint if I need to. I can use it on my painting if I want to wet the surface of the paper really quickly, or if I want to use it for a technique. And so the spray bottle that I have is one that has the adjustable nozzle, because if you have one that's just an overall mist, some of the techniques you can't do with that kind of bottle. Okay, and just a couple last things is that I use the Scotch brand masking tape, and it says in here, number 2020, and I have done some videos where I show the masking tape and how I use it to mask my painting. So if I am going to cover this hummingbird with some masking tape to protect it instead of using masking fluid, then that is the masking tape I use. And then also I will use this to go around the edges of my paper if I need to hold it down better. The Scotch 2020 is higher adhesion, so it's a little stickier, and I find it works really well for masking. And it comes in different sizes, so I have a couple different sizes. And then the last couple things are I use my mechanical pencil for doing my drawings. I like that it has consistent sharp lead because it's all one size, and I like the 0.7 lead so that it's not too thick. And then I like the erasers that are white and they come in the stick. I tend to do most of my erasing and drawing and all of that on a separate piece of paper. That way I'm not marring my watercolor paper. And but I can use a white eraser on my watercolor paper, and that works well. The other thing would be a kneaded eraser, and I do not have one over here right now, but I will use a kneaded eraser every now and then on my paper. The pen that I like to go over my drawing with is the Uniball Vision, and it is a nice black ink and it flows out of the pen well, so that tends to be the one that I use, and it's waterproof. So yeah, and that's just one of those. And then I just have a variety of brushes. I have some toothbrushes for splattering color, some flats. I have a blade that you can get like at the hardware store, and it's one that you can break off the tip to use when you're doing masking tape, and some other techniques, and then just a variety of other brushes. And those a lot of them will sit in my bag and not be used except for every now and then, so you do not need to have all these brushes, especially in the beginning, but over time you might end up adding to your collection. So I hope this was helpful, just to kind of see how I lay out my art table and some of the tools that I use. And if you're wanting to see a specific kind of tip or trick video on something to do with watercolor, please let me know and in the comments below, and I will keep putting those out as I get new ones. I have a couple in line coming up that people have asked for, and so I hope you have a nice day. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.